Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 61, Returning to Japan and Living Together. Komaeda Nagito had been in the hospital for more than half a month, and finally, when Kudo Shinichi was preparing to return to Japan, Komaeda could go along with him. Dazai Osamu, being a social worker of sorts, had to leave a few days earlier than them. Mori Ogai, upon hearing that Komaeda Nagito had more or less recovered, hurriedly summoned Dazai Osamu back. The port mafia is really short on manpower these days. Even if Dazai Osamu tends to slack off, he's still as effective as 100 people. Not calling him back quickly would be a total waste of resources. Especially since the situation in Yokohama has been rather delicate lately. As soon as Dazai Osamu returned, Mori Ogai immediately summoned him to his office on the top floor. Mori Ogai looked at Dazai Osamu, who was radiant from eating and drinking well in Hawaii, and touched his own temple, remaining silent for a moment before slowly speaking. Dazai-kun, it seems like you've had quite a nice vacation, huh? That's right. Dazai Osamu agreed without the slightest attempt to hide it. But actually, Boss Mori looks like he's suffering from kidney deficiency. You should take care of your health. Mori Ogai, it's just that overworking a bit too much has left me exhausted. How dare you, someone who took a vacation overseas, have any right to criticize my hard work? The human-like ability Elise stopped a distance from Dazai Osamu, but still couldn't resist commenting sarcastically, your hairline is really receding quite obviously, you're completely just a defeated old man. Oh, Elise, don't say such harsh things. Dazai Osamu, bored to death, looked at Mori Ogai and the manifestation of his own ability playing out, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. Feeling that if the conversation continued, his heart would be pierced countless times, Mori Ogai decisively abandoned this ineffective effort and spoke directly. There were some things that couldn't be said over the phone, but now that you've returned, I can ask. If I'm not mistaken, the task I gave you was to take the opportunity to get in touch with the guild, while negotiating business with Fitzgerald at the Tei Corporation, right? I feel that I completed the task quite well. Dazai Osamu confidently stated, even my return plane ticket was paid for by Fitzgerald. He now has no doubts about the port mafia and even remembers me as the first Japanese name. In fact, under his machinations, Fitzgerald only remembered him. Otherwise, without his efforts, Fitzgerald would have soon forgotten what the port mafia was called. Mori Ogai took a deep breath, so, do you know why the guild has started contacting the Japanese government? His original plan was that even if the guild looked down on a small country like Japan, but if the port mafia could establish a connection with the guild, they would be able to expand overseas in the future, at least to build up an intelligence network. In the end, the port mafia didn't even have to take any action before the guild unusually began extending their influence to Japan. This is too abnormal, especially since this happened right after Dazai Osamu went to America and had contact with the guild's leader, Fitzgerald. If Dazai Osamu claims he knows nothing about it, even Mori Ogai could figure out with his toes that he's lying. That's mean Dazai Osamu is getting harder to control. Originally, he thought that knowing Komaeda-kun as a friend might make Dazai Osamu more like a normal person with weaknesses, whose thought process could be predicted, and who could be controlled. But looking at it now, it has had the complete opposite effect. Mori Ogai's thoughts could be more or less guessed by Dazai Osamu. In fact, from the moment he decided to tell Fitzgerald about the book for convenience's sake, he had already anticipated this situation. However, being noticed so quickly getting the attention of the rats who is also interested in the book was somewhat unexpected. He initially thought that even if someone had this kind of calculation, they would act more cautiously. He hadn't expected such a simple and brute approach, making it hard not to recognize the familiar methods of the person behind it. Dazai Osamu had never been entirely loyal to Mori Ogai, so he only shared select parts of what he knew, deliberately mixing up the order when he spoke. Fitzgerald is looking for a way to bring his daughter back to life. He heard there's something in Japan that can grant wishes, so he even came to ask me some questions. Mori Ogai's expression slightly changed. Even if he didn't know about the existence of the book, just hearing the news that there's something in Japan that can grant wishes was, for him, earth-shattering bad news. because it meant that Japan would likely be far from peaceful in the future. Are there many foreigners who know about this? Mori Ogai asked impatiently. Not much, but, Dazai-Osamu suddenly smiled. Fitzgerald received the information too easily, almost as if someone deliberately gave it to him, so aside from the guild, at least one more person is hiding in the shadows and keeping an eye on Japan. Since it was impossible for Mori Ogai to get the actual situation out of Fitzgerald, Dazai-Osamu effortlessly shifted the blame onto that sneaky hidden person. This explanation was well-founded and convincing, so Mori Ogai didn't suspect too much. Dazai-Osamu then asked him, "So, what is the guild doing in Japan?" Mori Ogai replied, "Collecting intelligence. Then let them gather information." Dazai-Osamu said indifferently, "When we truly figure out what they want, who knows what will happen. Besides, whether that thing is genuine or just bait, it's uncertain. As long as it doesn't disturb Yokohama's order, there's no need to interfere." Mori Ogai naturally understood this reasoning as well, but the problem was that he knew the book was real. When the time came and something happened, Yokohama would still be the one in trouble. However, he couldn't say this to Dazai-Osamu. If Dazai-Osamu knew about the existence of the book, who knows what might happen. Mori Ogai, feeling quite suppressed, asked, "By the way, your report?" Like squeezing out toothpaste, ask one question, get one answer. Do you think it's not exhausting? Can't you be a bit more self-aware and just handed me the report? Dazai-Osamu rummaged through the pocket of his coat and pulled out a piece of paper folded 4 times. It looked extremely casual, practically no different from a newspaper bought off the street. But Mori Ogai, having seen it too many times, no longer minded. The fact that Dazai-Osamu could even be bothered to write a report was impressive enough. He roughly glanced over it and said, "You may go now." "Huh. I thought Boss Mori wanted to ask about Komaeda-kun," Dazai-Osamu said with a surprised laugh. "You even called me to take care of Komaeda-kun. Boss Mori, have you finally confirmed that Komaeda-kun is your illegitimate child?" This is obviously a joke, and Mori Ogai helplessly replied, "It's impossible for something like that to happen. I just truly appreciate Komaeda-kun and support you maintaining your friendship with him. Out of the goodness of my heart, I've granted you approval. Is there a problem?" Facing this half-hearted response, Dazai-Osamu smiled and said, "No problem at all, Boss Mori is very kind. The old fox really is cunning, but judging by his demeanor, it seems he's abandoned the idea of pulling Komaeda-kun into the port mafia. I wonder what happened." Regarding the cause, Dazai-Osamu actually guessed that it might be related to Natsume Soseki. He already had a clue and thought he would investigate it properly when the opportunity arose. By the time Komaeda Nagito returned to Japan, Dazai-Osamu had already worked for a few days. His complexion, nourished back to health while freeloading food and drink in the hospital, had once again turned a bit pale. "Let me sleep for a while." Dazai-Osamu sprawled on the sofa in Komaeda Nagito's living room, refusing to get up. "I was promised a vacation, but in the end, all the postponed work piled up for me to handle when I got back. Because he had shared the story of his own memories with Dazai-Osamu, Komaeda Nagito's attitude towards Dazai-Osamu has subtly changed. Simply put, he has become even more casual, no longer holding back and sometimes saying rather strange things due to the clash in their worldviews. Noticing his change in attitude, Dazai-Osamu instinctively developed the skill of smoothly adapting to situations. When Komaeda Nagito returned home this time, he found more and more items belonging to Dazai-Osamu appearing around the house. In the past, there were only a few spare toothbrushes, toothpaste, and some toiletries and clothes, but this time, even blankets and pillows had been moved in. Anyway, compared to my dorm, I spend even more time at Komaeda-kun's house. The dorm room isn't as comfortable as this place. At that time, Dazai-Osamu even complained, "Boss Mori gives me so much work, he probably wishes I'd never leave the office." Komaeda Nagito had no objections, but, "Do you really have to sleep on the sofa? How about I tidy up a guest room for you instead?" "Really?" Dazai-Osamu seemed to have been waiting for those words, "Then I won't be polite." Thus, during a gathering at the Lupin bar that evening, Sakaguchi Ango brought up the topic. Dazai, I heard some strange rumors. Are you living together with Komaeda-kun? That's right. Dazai Osamu poked at the ice cube in his glass of liquor. As expected of an intelligence agent, you're really well informed. Oda Sakunosuke didn't quite understand. Wasn't Dazai frequently visiting Komaeda-kun's house before to avoid disturbances? Sakaguchi Ango took a deep breath. That's different, Oda Saku. Before, Dazai only occasionally dropped by to laze around. Now, he's practically moving his dorm there. You have no idea the strange rumors I've been hearing. Dazai Osamu was brimming with interest. What kind of rumors? Nothing. Sakaguchi Ango closed his mouth, fell silent for 3 seconds, then opened it again. Dazai, are you and Komaeda-kun friends now? That's right. Dazai Osamu responded matter-of-factly. Otherwise, why would I want to move in? Sakaguchi Ango quietly said, normally, you wouldn't want to move into a friend's house. I hate the dormitory. Dazai Osamu sighed. I suspect Boss Mori is messing with me. He arranged Akutagawa's dorm room right below mine. This news was indeed something Sakaguchi Ango wasn't aware of, not because it was a secret, but simply because it was too trivial to notice. However, he could roughly guess the reason Mori Ogai arranged it this way, probably so that you'd keep an eye on Akutagawa. It's so Akutagawa can keep an eye on me, Dazai Osamu replied with an indifferent expression. This was a matter of supervision, different from the kind of careful management Sakaguchi Ango spoke of, and similar to finding a job for Dazai Osamu, making it so that he couldn't act freely. Although Akutagawa Yunosuke himself definitely would not admit this, he always tried his best to earn Dazai Osamu's approval, but this effort was taken advantage of by Mori Ogai, and in Dazai Osamu's eyes, it became particularly bothersome. In short, because someone saw you strolling around with Komaeda-kun, so. Dazai Osamu, unapologetic, strolling with Komaeda-kun is quite interesting, you know? We just casually went out to buy breakfast, and ended up stumbling upon a murder case, with the culprit even attempting to frame Komaeda-kun. Sakaguchi Ango, are you always going to find Komaeda-kun because of this kind of thing? Oda Sakunosuke said, Ango, if Dazai is happier doing this, then there's no need to worry about it. That's not why I want to interfere with the matter. Sakaguchi Ango hesitated. It's just that Komaeda-kun, an outsider, being so prominent within the port mafia, isn't that a bit troublesome? After all, he is a disciple of Natsume Soseki-sensei. Even without any abilities, shouldn't he later join the special division and stand on the side of the government? Getting too deeply involved with the port mafia is a bit. Not to mention that Mori Ogai is also a disciple of Natsume Soseki. Sakaguchi Ango was worried, genuinely concerned that Komaeda Nagito might end up straying down the wrong path. Oda Sakunosuke, although unsure of what Sakaguchi Ango was thinking, understood the point. Indeed, if someone were to target the port mafia and went looking for Komaeda-kun. Dazai Osamu pondered for a moment. I think that you should be more worried about those aiming for Komaeda-kun. Recalling Komaeda Nagito's past achievements, the bar fell into silence. Speaking of which, it was still Dazai Osamu who broke the silence first. We haven't seen that cat today, have we? Oda Sakunosuke calmly replied, after all, this bar isn't a place for raising cats, it's unlikely for it to always be here. Though speaking like that, but after careful thought, it seemed like every time they gathered, they could always see that cat. Somehow, that calico cat had also become a regular at the bar. Today, not seeing it was originally nothing, but once someone brought it up, it felt like a regret. Forget it. Dazai Osamu picked up his glass of wine. Anyway, we'll meet again. Achoo! The calico cat that Dazai Osamu had his eyes on, Natsume Soseki, sneezed. Komaeda Nagito immediately showed concern. Sensei, are you alright? Nothing's wrong. Natsume Soseki had a good understanding of his own body's resilience. Probably someone is talking about me. Rubbing his nose, Natsume Soseki got to the main topic. The truth is, I should have come to see you as soon as you returned, but I had some matters on hand, so it got delayed until now. It's alright. Komaeda Nagito said considerately, in fact, my injuries have already healed almost completely. Rather, having you worry like this, sensei, really makes me feel guilty. I'm truly an unworthy disciple. Natsume Soseki replied without much concern, you are my disciple, there's no such thing as being unworthy. If I acknowledge you, then you are qualified. Pausing for a moment, he continued, seeing you recover well puts me at ease. Now, tell me about the details. Komaeda Nagito briefly explained the circumstances of his fall. Knowing that Natsume Soseki might still be concerned, he also mentioned that the Vongala family was involved in something in Hawaii. Vongala, huh? Natsume Soseki seemed to have some understanding. They have reported to the government here, and will only be conducting limited training of their decimo. It won't cause too much of a commotion. Moreover, the police have investigated, and that child grew up in Japan, has some resistance to becoming part of the mafia, and is a good kid. Even if they eventually go to Italy, it will be beneficial to Japan. It's fine to have contact, there's nothing to worry about. Vongala is primarily based in Italy, and their origin is a vigilante group. Among the Italian populace, their popularity is quite high, indicating that their style of action has always been reliable. Natsume Soseki did not elaborate much on this topic, roughly giving Komaeda Nagito an understanding, just enough to know who he was dealing with. He wasn't here this time to gather any intel from Komaeda Nagito. Pay attention to the next matter. Natsume Soseki cleared his throat. Crime and Punishment has been published, initially in Russian, and its sales are quite high. There are also some movements on the Russian publisher's side. Natsume Soseki was in charge of making the plan, then took out the tool, while the rest was handled by others who were in charge of communication and execution. Although Japan was a defeated nation, during the time they fought the war, they used every trick in the book, and there were still some loose ends overseas that hadn't been tied up, which were now just in time to be used. Originally, those carrying out the tasks were worried. Such a chaotic mess, sewing together a booklet from a bunch of unfinished works, translated from Japanese versions, would it be possible for Russia to publish it normally? After all, the publisher wasn't one of their people, and in this area, their methods weren't very effective. However, after seeing the translated draft, he had no questions. The translation was so well executed that, if not mentioned beforehand, one couldn't tell it was a translation. It seemed entirely like something a Russian had written. Most importantly was the quality of the work. Whether it was Russia or Japan, it had been a long time since he had seen a work of this caliber. Between the lines ran a faint sense of madness, as if the very soul was undergoing a profound interrogation. The Japanese spy stationed in Russia couldn't help but ask, is this really not an issue? People of this level can be counted on one hand. If they truly investigate, won't they find it? This is not something you should know, just act according to the plan. In the spy's heart, there was a bit of a muttered complaint. So, could it be that saying the translation is from Japanese to Russian is just deceiving him? Perhaps it was even written by the Russians, and in the plan, it was necessary to deceive even those on their own side. In any case, the spy in Russia performed some maneuvers, hiding himself behind the scenes, successfully drawing the editor's attention through his profession. Then, relying on high-quality work, without needing to do anything else himself, the other side enthusiastically prepared everything for the publication. That urgency, if it weren't for the spy knowing that this is not one of them, because it was too obvious, he would have thought the publisher was their investor. One could only say that in the Russian literary world, it had been a long time since anyone had seen a purple star of destiny. Every unfinished manuscript was being actively compiled for publication, pushing aside books originally intended for release, and bringing it to market half a month earlier than planned. Thus, the plan was to proceed with a speed unbelievable to the spy, smoothly from beginning to end. At least for this publication, it went quite smoothly without any issues. The publisher also put a lot of effort into expanding the marketing, fearing that people would see it as a posthumous work, think it was incomplete, and not want to read it, thereby missing out on this magnificent masterpiece. The publisher's movements suggest they're trying to bait us, huh? Komaeda Nagito asked. Natsume Soseki shook his head. Besides the publisher, there are other forces involved in marketing, crime and punishment. Even if someone asks the author about related matters, they are just people pushed forward as a front. The ones behind the marketing push are the ones we should be paying attention to, probably still in hiding. It's not so easy to catch them. I see. Komaeda Nagito thought for a moment, then smiled and said, but this has nothing to do with me, right? I'm only responsible for transcribing the manuscript. Even if they want my memory now, they won't find anything. I can't even recall 10% of the manuscript, let alone reproduce it accurately. An anomaly is still an anomaly, even if it brings many benefits, it's still an anomaly. Being able to return to normal now is a good thing for you, said Natsume Soseki. I just received some information. Yokohama might be a bit chaotic in the next few years, and the plan might be affected. Have you considered moving? While speaking, Natsume Soseki's eyes drifted to Dazai Osamu's coat lying on the sofa, his cup and snacks on the table, and the unfinished book. He sighed softly. Tokyo isn't bad, it's not like I'm asking you to sell your house, just to stay in Tokyo more permanently. After all, studying in Tokyo is also more convenient for you. Komaeda Nagito, unlike his first and second disciples, had no responsibility toward Yokohama, and even appeared weak and helpless. Unknowingly putting on a filter, Natsume Soseki thought with worry, indeed, it would be safer for his young disciple to stay in Tokyo. That Dazai Osamu brat takes a mile when given an inch. Komaeda Nagito was silent for a moment. Sensei, I don't know if you're aware, but the house I bought in Tokyo was burned down. Natsume Soseki, this old man knows. Natsume Soseki felt a bit of a headache as he spoke. If he were to consider it, he could indeed find a place for Komaeda Nagito to stay, but what if after he found a place, the neighbors got caught up in Komaeda Nagito's misfortune, leading to some kind of fire or other incident? How would he deal with it? He would have to take responsibility for the neighbors. And he couldn't find some remote place for Komaeda Nagito to stay either, since the boys still had to attend school. So, after all consideration, it seemed best for Komaeda Nagito to find a place himself, but Natsume Soseki's suggestion to move was a spur-of-the-moment greedy thought. He originally came just to check in on his little disciple and give a few pieces of advice. It had been a while since he last visited, and now, traces of Dazai Osamu were everywhere. The old father. No, the teacher's heart instantly felt a little complicated. Dazai Osamu was always one to attract trouble. The guild's actions in Japan, whether or not they had anything to do with Dazai Osamu, still lacked a definitive conclusion. He suspected that Dostoevsky's purpose back when he caused the Dragon's Head conflict was also related to the book. Otherwise, there wasn't any other place in Japan that could attract these foreign ability users. Continuing to mix with Dazai Osamu, could Dostoevsky perhaps follow Dazai Osamu's line to find Komaeda Nagito? He did promise to protect Komaeda Nagito. Sensei. Komaeda Nagito interrupted Natsume Soseki's worries. With what you've just said, my heart is already at ease. No need to worry too much about me, even if I don't move. I'm not afraid of the trouble. He said with a carefree laugh, a hint of madness flashing in his eyes. Running away isn't my style, just like giving in to despair, it's worse than garbage. I have to witness hope being born, whether I become a stepping stone or embody that hope myself. Sensei, I want to give it a try. Natsume Soseki silently looked at him for a few seconds. The young man's voice and gaze gave him a feeling of such madness, yet the words he spoke were so calm and logical, as if completely torn apart by the emotions controlling him. It had a kind of dangerously thrilling impact. Natsume Soseki, under such a gaze, couldn't help but be shaken by the other's powerful will. He had long known that Komaeda Nagito was an extremely emotional person, but he hadn't thought that he could control himself to such a degree. Good. Truly worthy of being my disciple. It was this old man who underestimated you. Komaeda Nagito indeed wasn't as strong as Fukuzawa Yukichi or Mori Ogai, but his will and drive to act were in no way inferior to those two. Treating him as an ordinary weakling would be an insult. Just go ahead and do as you wish, Natsume Soseki said. But as for the fishing plan, you don't need to get involved anymore. We've already made arrangements on our side. Understood. Komaeda Nagito closed his eyes, collecting himself after almost losing control from the joy of being in such an important moment. Thank you, sensei. Supporting disciples' ideals is also the responsibility of a teacher. Natsume Soseki calmly said, this old man also wants to know what you are capable of. But this old man has one key point, and that is my disciples absolutely cannot engage in activities that harm the nation's interests or anti-humanity nonsense. Understand? Komaeda Nagito responded, understood. Good then, remember to submit your assignment by the end of the year. Natsume Soseki put on his little round hat, preparing to turn into a cat. Have you decided on the topic? What type are you planning to write? Komaeda Nagito laughed brightly and said, of course, it's about passionate love for hope. Change it. Natsume Soseki said with weary heart, I don't need you to write that for me to understand it well enough. A few times meeting Komaeda Nagito, he always heard him saying, hope, hope, hope. He is really about to kneel down. There was no need to even read it anymore. Komaeda Nagito pondered, okay, then change to what? Anything is fine. Natsume Soseki decided this time he didn't need to emphasize anything about love. That Dazai Osamu brat is really unsuitable. Chapter 61 End.